thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited to talk to you. You know, this festival is a stunning festival with so many filmmakers, and as one individual person, I don't always have the opportunity to view the entire film before I get to talk to you guys. But in this case, I have been able to see your work.
And saw the documentary. Thank you.
I'm so honored. I have my own opinions of the criminal justice system in general. So this was an important film for me as a spectator to watch. I'm excited for you to tell us a little bit about this film. Am I right? This is an Oscar qualifying documentary.
It is an Oscar qualifying documentary short. It's called The Window on Death Row. We just had our premiere in August. So it's all happening quite rapidly. But it's interesting when you hear the title of the film, you know, at first blush, people are like, oh, it's going to be academic, or, oh, I'm going to be schooled in the justice system. And it's anything but. It's a very emotional film about Joaquín José Martínez. He was on Florida's death row for a crime he didn't commit, a dual national, American and Spanish. So he was ultimately the first Spaniard to be exonerated from US death row. So the film really asks us, what would you do with that second chance of life? You know, where do we find the compassion and humanity on death row? And can stories of trauma also hold resilience and joy? So I'd be very curious about what your experience was watching the film, what inspiration you found from it, and if kind of what I'm saying holds true.
I absolutely do think it holds true. You know, one of the things I think that in our society, we say, you know, innocent until proven guilty. But I don't know that internally we really hold on to that principle. I think when someone gets labeled as a criminal, we look for their guilt, not their innocence. And your film really captures looking for the innocence in all of our humanity, and seeing that this is a person. I think what's dangerous is when we make anything an it is easy to punish an it. When we depersonalize someone's story, I think it's easy to criminalize anything. And your film really brings that out. It almost doesn't matter that he's innocent in a way, for the relevance of this.
That's really interesting you said that, because when I started this documentary process, I wanted to be sure I got beyond that binary of innocence versus guilt. I didn't want to do what the typical Netflix true crime dramas do, though I am a fan. I do devour those. But I didn't want to turn the viewer into the judge or the jury. I wanted the viewer to be along for the ride, to be emotionally connected to Joaquín and all that he had gone through, and also understand the nuance of this process. So Joaquín has this experience where he's on death row. He comes out. I am covering what his life is, kind of what are the pieces after all of that, 20 years since his release. How does he cope with the trauma? How does he really transform that trauma into advocacy? And in the film, he has a reunion with his chaplain who helped him through some of his bleakest moments. And there are just these powerful moments together where Joaquín confesses to him that he feels he would have been dead if he hadn't gone to death row. The path that his life had taken. And so to reach that nuance and that understanding and that complexity, I mean, so much of this film really is about redefining these common expectations or understanding and surprising you. Like another example for anyone who watches the trailer, it opens with Joaquín talking about kind of the absurdity of the last meal.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you're going to be dead tomorrow. You're going to see, the sequence of those. You're going to see the last minute of your life on the clock, and they're telling you, choose a meal, right? And the powerful moment or kind of transforming aspect of that is Joaquín when he's exonerated. And at this point, he becomes quite close to the people, the fellow death row inmates in his pod. He buys a sandwich for every single one of the guys on death row. And he shares it with them. And he says, it's like, this is our last meal together. It's a shared meal. So he completely transforms that understanding and really shows us what those human connections are and what they mean.
I feel, gosh, it's a stunning piece of work. And, you know, I want to ask you, because this is a Femme Film Festival, and I'm curious what part of your perspective as a woman really shaped the lens on how this story was told.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to kind of dance around in the world of stereotypes. I will say, if there was a word to describe me as a filmmaker, it would be empathic, for better or worse, right? I have a journalist background. For the past 2 decades, I've been a foreign correspondent, worked with the Wall Street Journal in various conflict zones, and I've felt this urge to always find the humanity in the cruelest and bleakest of moments, like to seek that out and find uplift. I don't know if that comes from a feminine aspect of my character or simply just, the way I was born. But I think that in this piece, you really see that a lot, and on two levels. One level is, of course, the way that I search for that within the story and the structure of the story, but also the environment I build and some of my policies and ethics in preparing someone for an interview. So I make sure that whenever I'm inviting someone into a documentary project, that person's ready to speak from the position of empowerment rather than victimhood. They're choosing to tell their story. They're ready to tell their story. And I asked myself, how do I create those conditions? So if you look at the opening of my documentary, which is playing October 16th at La Femme in the 2 p.m. block, the first question I asked Joaquín, you like how I fit that in there?
Yeah. I was going to get to it too. But
I also have a radio background. The first question that I asked Joaquín, though, is why are you doing this? Just to make sure it's okay for him. And in some ways that is, again, for better or worse, a dog whistle to other filmmakers who work in documentary, because so many of us struggle with this question of exploitation versus elevating a voice, particularly if I've never been on death row. I don't have a family member on death row. How do I work my way into this world, and how do I make sure that Joaquín is entering on his terms? And one other thing I would add is, in terms of creating the comfort, I made sure to invite his wife wanted to come, and I made sure to invite her and have her available for him during our hours and hours of interviews if he felt stressed or overwhelmed. And she was just wonderful in that process. And I also made sure, so we were very indie. It's basically me and wonderful DOP Marco Castro, who helped with some of the filming. And so we were filming in his home, in his studio apartment. And I made sure to remove all the light bulbs, the exposed light bulbs. Because when Joaquín entered death row in 97, they were testing the electric chair. There had just been a botched execution right before, where the person who was being executed had caught fire. And so various government officials and committees were testing the chair, and all Joaquín remembers from his first few days there, or much of what he remembers, is the flickering of the light bulb as they tested it. And so he gets a very visceral emotional response when he sees those. So we made sure to remove all of those and just not create any sort of trigger for him. So he felt ready to tell a story and welcome.
Wow.
And and he opened up about that. And also that, this is very interesting, his first few weeks on death row, as they were going through this process, and they still are going through it today. What is the best way to execute someone? What's the cleanest way? So we don't have to pay attention to what the reality of what we're doing. Do we switch over from lethal injection to nitrogen? Like what is going on here? Is it the shooting range? Like there's all these conversations now throughout the United States. And Joaquín, his first few weeks, he was actually given a questionnaire. There was one question on it. It was multiple choice. And he was essentially asked, so how do you want to die? And so there he is sitting on death row, and he has to check a box for the method of which he would most likely want to die. I just think I tell the story of humanity, but I also tell the story of these moments where our humanity really is called into question. And I just hope, whether or not people are for the death penalty or not, they just start to ask these questions about, what does humanity mean? What does closure mean? Is there ever an ethical reason or way to kill someone?
Such important questions to ask. I don't want to inject my opinion in this, but I would love for our audiences to. I want to hear a little bit about what drew you to this subject and why you are absolutely the right person to tell this story. I think that you are, but that's what I mean about not injecting my opinion. Why are you the right person to tell this story?
I don't want to get into too much personal detail, because I want to make sure that the film truly is about Joaquín and really an entryway or a window to the 200 people who've been exonerated in the past 50 years, not just him. But I will say that so many of us have this pain that we walk around with, or this injustice that we face that can't be undone. Mm-hmm. And so it reaches a point where you ask yourself that question, well, how do I work through that? How do I find closure? And if if anyone takes away anything from this film, it's really that theme of forgiveness that I hope resonates most. Forgiveness, because what we found with Joaquín and what we found with a number of the victims' families is that is what leads to this opening. That's what leads to some reconciliation of this pain. And so I found that through this process of working and speaking with Joaquín, and I just hope the viewers are kind of exposed to that and that journey. I mean, this was interesting for me because we used to call us, I was foreign correspondent in the field. I'd have I'd be like a mule, right? I have my backpack, I'd have my camera, my light kit. I was called a one-woman army. That was it, right? You did it all. You were,
That seems like an appropriate title in the
right, one-woman army. With this project, I actually stepped out of that space where I wasn't filming for the first time. I'm usually behind that camera in some capacity. And so it was me and Joaquín sharing this experience together, crying together. And though I was asking him questions and he was responding, there was still a connection there because I was going through my own personal journey inside my head. And I think for people who watch the film, or for yourself, I'd be curious if that intimacy and that kind of comfort and trust that we've built did resonate through the story that Joaquín told.
It absolutely does. And to your point that we all have a different story, but that oftentimes our stories are laced in trauma. And I found this story incredibly relatable. In full transparency, my mother passed in February. It's been a very, oh, no worries. But I'm cultivating my story around this. I was estranged from my mother for 25 years. We connected in my 30s. And so I'm cultivating this story as a creator myself. And I share that with you because my impetus to continue to create comes when I meet filmmakers like you or hear these stories that are such personal, vulnerable stories. And what I've realized is sometimes I feel like what separates humanity is our willingness to be seen. And sometimes there's a negativity around vulnerability, and your film captures that. Vulnerability isn't weakness. It's this willingness to have our trauma be seen.
Wow. Yeah.
And I just found that so compelling. So although my story really doesn't necessarily parallel the experience of this story, walking through my own personal trauma, I feel like I have permission to kind of be messy and flail as we all kind of navigate our trauma. And I think that's what beautiful filmmaking does. It's relatable without us being able to relate to the particular details of each individual story.
I love that, to be seen, to be ready to be seen, to be vulnerable, like all of those things, but also interestingly to see others, see you, seeing them, seeing you.
Yes.
Like, yeah, that whole. But it's also interesting too, the way we kind of cope with the trauma and how it comes out, because there's also a lot of, I don't want to okay, bring your tissues, yes, but there's also a lot of humor, and there's a lot of hope, and there's a lot of love and joy in this. And I just want to share one quick story. I know we're going a bit over, but on my Instagram, I had posted for the Window on Death Row. It's called Window Death Row, the Instagram handle. I had posted the trailer. And someone wrote, "I'm dying to see this film!" !
Oh, no.
And okay, I know. Initially, people would think cringe, right? Like, how could you do that? But I was just like, yes, exactly. And I'd remembered this moment in the film where the chaplain and Joaquín are reuniting after 20 years, and they're talking about the men in prison. And the chaplain says to Joaquín, "It's funny how they say often, I'm dying to enjoy the things I used to complain about." Dying to enjoy the things I used to complain about. And that's it. That's the message of the film. That's the message of our coping. There can be joy. There can be this seeking of human connection, this seeking of the feeling of the rain on your hands, or, frankly, seeking out the annoyance of doing the dishes or getting lip from your kid, the things you used to complain about,
Yeah.
So I was grateful. I wrote her and I said, "I'm so glad you're dying to see."
Oh.
Hope you can make it in LA.
Oh, I love it. It has been such a delight to talk to you. I could talk to you forever. Please join me in watching a beautiful clip of The Window on Death Row. Thanks, Linda.
Thank you.
Choose a meal. You're going to be executed tomorrow. You're going to see the last minute of your life on the clock. You don't know if you're going to scream, and they're telling you, choose a meal. I was there 3 years, and I was losing my mind.
It's amazing to me that anybody can continue in that situation and not give up.
I felt a lot of hatred, and I felt betrayed by God. I recall the conversations I would have with Brother Dale, and he says, you know, maybe it's wrong that you're here, but God hasn't abandoned you. Maybe it's you that has not just abandoned God, but yourself.
You have to assume that of the 1,600 people who've been executed, we probably have executed innocent people.
How do we justify taking human life gratuitously?
Pero fíjate, ¿no? Las celdas, qué pequeñas son.
No me desperté esposo, Señor, con mi libertad. Ese es uno de los nuestros.
And Madam Clerk, would you publish the verdict, please?
State of Florida versus Joaquín José Martínez. We, the jury, find as follows as to count 1 of the indictment. Defendant is not guilty.
When they tell me that I'm going home, I bought a sandwich for every single one of the guys on death row. It was like saying, this is our last meal together. Hablo en contra de la pena de muerte por lo que representa. El odio, el rencor, la venganza, la falta de compasión, la falta de perdón, la falta de humanidad.
You know, healing is taking place when somebody is using their experience of trauma to try and relieve the suffering of others.
En este sentido, el perdón libera, ¿no?
Me hace sentir a mí bien.
Libera porque te...
You know, I believed in the death penalty. I grew up thinking, you know, that it was, I guess in some ways, a relief for the victims' families. If anything, it served as closure to the victims' families, you know?
They talk about that whole deal about it's supposed to bring closure. There's no such thing. It doesn't happen.
Por todos los que están condenados a muerte, chicos, no solo rezar, sino también ayudar en todo lo que se pueda ayudar. I think we'll get there.
You're hopeful.
Yeah. Oh, es la luz. Hope.